Hello and welcome to the Jewish Music Masterclass series produced by the Lowell Milken Center for Music of American Jewish Experience at the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music. We are thrilled to have you join us for Music and Conversation with tonight's or this morning's guest, Gerard Edery. To make sure that you know about all of our programs related to music of the American Jewish Experience, please make sure you are on our mailing list. You can find the link in the chat, or you can also just do a quick Google search for us. That's the way I find us to this day. The next program in our Jewish Music Masterclass series will be taking place next month on February 16th at 9 a.m. and will feature the incomparable Daniel Kahn, a real troubadour of the Yiddish world. So we ask that you join us for that. It will be in a similar format in that we will be streaming that one at 9 a.m. as well as he will be coming to us live from Berlin. With that, I will ask that you put any questions that you have for Mr. Edery into the chat or hold it, and you may ask us towards the end, and you can directly talk to him. And now on to this evening's program. Gerard Edery was born in Casablanca and raised in Paris and New York City. Edery graduated from the prestigious Manhattan School of Music with a bachelor's and master's degree in operatic performance, and has sung for more than 30 roles with opera companies around the United States. Highlights of Gerard's extensive career include performances at Carnegie Hall, Alice Tully, the United Nations in both New York and Geneva, the Kimmel Center in Philadelphia, Royce Hall in LA, the Smithsonian Institute and Seiji Ozawa Hall at Tanglewood, just to name a few. He has also performed at the Vilnius International Folk Festival, the PAC Sacred Music Festival, the Klaipėda Concert Series with Chamber Orchestra in Lithuania, as well as the Warsaw Music Academy in Poland, among others. He was especially honored to perform for the 300-year anniversary celebrating the Bevis Mark Synagogue, the oldest Sephardic synagogue in the UK. Gerard also has been an active educator for all ages. He has been a featured artist for Carnegie Hall's Musical Explorer series, the 92nd Street Y educational outreach program, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, the Center for Jewish History. In case anyone can't tell, he's a born and bred New Yorker through that. And now we are incredibly honored and privileged to have him here as part of our wonderful Jewish Music Masterclass. So with that, I would like to introduce Gerard Edery. Gerard, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Laurie. It's a pleasure to be here, especially during this pandemic time when there are so few opportunities to perform live. So the internet, being online, has become a lifeline for myself and so many artists, who are really struggling to reassert their artistic juices and keep their creative endeavors going. So, pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And I should say that from our perspective, it's also a lifeline for audiences. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is we're able to survive through your music and the music of so many others. And so thank you for that on behalf of all of us audiences. So we're certainly going to begin with some of your music. We got to listen to a wonderful work prior to the actual class. And we're going to jump in with a real standard, Quando El Nimrod, because, starting from a place where many of us who come from the Jewish music world might already have a sense of what that sounds like. So with that, can you tell us a little bit about this song and what makes this performance unique?
If there is one Sephardic national anthem, then it certainly is Quando el Rey Nimrod. And the legend goes that when the Sephardic Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492 with only what they could carry, they were singing this song on the way to the Holy Land. And of course, the diaspora ended up in Morocco and Algeria, the Ottoman Empire, but who knows whether it's true or not. But this song is as we say in Hebrew, Messinai. It's one of these songs that, with a melody and a text that keeps on giving. I think I must have, I don't know, 5 or 6 arrangements just to this song. And there are several songs in the Sephardic repertoire that transcend time and place for me. And yes, they happen to be from the Sephardic Jewish tradition, but they are songs that have such a wide, wide berth that allows people to come in. And I always say, let us do music to invite people into our world.
I can't think of a better way to start this. Then this is how we are inviting people into our musical world through this song. So with that, and I did want to mention, this is a unique performance. We're going to see a video here. Can you just say a few words about the performance?
I was in Berlin. In fact, your next artist is from Berlin, so we're in the same time zone. But this was several years ago at the Reichsstrasse Synagogue, one of the historic synagogues in Germany. And it was one of these inspiring environments. As you'll see, it's a beautiful, beautiful synagogue with a very live acoustic. I was there actually doing a program with the storyteller Penina Schramm, with whom I've collaborated since 1991. And we were invited there. And so we did some joint programs. And this is one of the songs from that program.
Fabulous. Sorry, I shared the wrong screen for a moment. There's always a little bit of feeling like you're in command and control here.
Yeah.
All right. Can everyone see my video just fine, or the black screen at the moment?
Al campo salía, miraba en el cielo y el maestro hería, miró la luz santa en la trudería que había de nacer. Abraham
It took all my energy not to stand up and start dancing, which is not an uncommon occurrence at these master classes, but still. I did want to bring up just a little bit your guitar playing. I mentioned in your bio that you're a very accomplished vocalist, but one of the things that really stands out in that video is your guitar chops. I mean, it's fun. It adds a lot of the life and the bounce to it. Can you tell us a little bit about the guitar background?
Well, I started playing guitar when I was 9 years old, and it's actually a funny anecdote. My father, who always wanted to play every instrument that he could lay his hands on, but had a tin ear and never succeeded very much, said to me one day, "Why don't you come just keep me company at my guitar lesson?" And so I went, and his teacher's partner had a free hour. So he says, "You want to try it? Okay, why don't you try the lesson?" I did, and a few months later, my father quit, and I just kept on going. So I've played really all my life with a long pause, long hiatus during my opera years. Opera is a jealous mistress, so I had very, very little time to continue practicing. But I had enough of a foundation that when I came back to it, it was like riding a bicycle.
Wow. And there, you know what, there was a question that most questions I'll save towards the end, but this is a question that worth just bringing up. Would you mind just summarizing a little bit the lyrics of Adio Korea for those of us that, Cuando el Nimrod, for those of us that are not as familiar with Ladino?
When King Nimrod went out into the Jewish quarter, he saw a light shining, which was a sure sign that Avram Avinu, Padre Querido, Padre Bendicho, beloved, blessed Father, was about to be born. Luz de Israel, the light of Israel. That's just in a nutshell.
Well, that's something to dance for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually my rumba, flamenco rumba interpretation, but I have several others with more traditional rhythms. One of my aims has always been to use the Sephardic repertoire and bring it to a contemporary feel, because I'm not trying to recreate museum pieces. Nobody knows exactly how this music sounded, but Sephardic music, as many oral traditions can attest, started with hand clapping or a drum, a very, very simple kind of accompaniment. And the guitar is a relatively modern addition to this repertoire. The oud, right, the Middle Eastern Arabic lute, would be more in line with what might have been played earlier on. So for me, oral traditions are fluid, and unless they are injected with the energy and the creativity of artists in the present day, the oral traditions kind of die out. It's like telling stories. You know, what keeps us strong as a Jewish people, our stories, our songs. And if we don't keep them alive, and if we don't transmit them in any way that we can, right, they will eventually be forgotten.
Well, you know what? I might suggest that we do a slight pinch hit on our order of songs, because you mentioned just how you really do think about innovation, how you're thinking about how oral traditions are fluid. And I'm wondering if maybe an example of that and how you get pretty creative with some of the sounds that you use would be Gul Pembe as the next tune.
Gul Pembe, but if you play Kochav Tzedek, it has some of the same qualities that you're talking about. It's also a song about Abraham. And it's a song that's originally from Morocco, very, very old tune, which I decided to arrange again in a very modern way. It's a studio recording, which I layered with many guitar parts, many vocals, unbelievable virtuoso instrumentalists. And it's a song honoring Abraham, honoring his strength, his wisdom, his courage that has been transmitted from generation to generation. Le Dor Vador.
Well, let's listen to Kochav Sedek.
Wrong one. It's okay. That was Bin el Barachul Yum. You know, again, similar, but it's not there. It's Kochav Tzedek. That's it.
צדק לדורות זרעורו אחד היה אברהם בבני דורו אשר באביב שנותיו הכיר יוצרו וירא שם במורותיו את משטרו כוכב צדק לדורות זרעורו אחד היה אברהם בבני דורו אשר באביב שנותיו הכיר יוצרו וירא שם במורותיו את משטרו זקן יושב בישיבה לא שר צבא ועם שורפי חרב עוד זכרו לובה
Okay. And I lay down just a rough track as if I'm performing live. And then I do a guitar part, and then I do a vocal, so that each are recorded separately. And then it's like painting. I keep adding layers. And what I love about going from the recording studio to the stage is that one feeds the other. You know, how do I choose my repertoire? That's the more basic question, because for as long as I've been doing this and people call me, you know, do you know this song? Do you know that song? They consider me knowledgeable about Sephardic music. I still feel like I've only barely scratched the surface. And I go through volumes and volumes of manuscripts that I have. I listen to recordings that have been done by other artists. And not all of it is great stuff, right? I have the Alberto Hemzi collection, Isaac Levy. I mean, I could go on and on. And I'll go through, and what is it that makes me choose a particular song? It's when the melody grabs you. You know, not all the melodies are great. Some of them are boring. So I look for the Sephardic greatest hits, as it were, to put it simply. And once I find the melody, I look at the text and I go, wow, interesting text. And very often I try to find the universality in the music. I try to find a way that these old ancient songs, some of them many hundred years old, speak to us today. And what is it that always speaks to human beings when it comes to music? Rhythm first, then melody, then text. So if the melody doesn't show me an immediate rhythm, I impose a rhythm on that melody. as I did in a way with this groove. One of the big things that I do with my sound engineers, we spend time finding the groove that will just grab you. And so this last song that you heard, Kohav Tzedek, is from my album, which I titled Dance with Sepharad. Because on every tune, we try to find a groove that just grabs you. And then there's the melody and text. So that's a little bit of background and process. It's really my process when I'm in the recording studio.
If I can just ask, because and again, forgive me for dropping out, but I jumped back into a very fascinating conversation. And just out of curiosity, knowing that this is, I have some klezmer background, and knowing that in the klezmer world, there is sometimes tension between the idea of being, true to a specific style and being innovative. And I'm curious if you've ever encountered that and how you navigate that very narrow line.
That's a fantastic question, and I have actually been at loggerheads with people who approach this music more traditionally, right? I'm on the very liberal end of Judaism, and liberal end in terms of approaching this traditional repertoire with whatever my creative mind takes, wherever it takes me to. At the same time, I greatly respect orthodoxy, right? It's like you've got to have something to push against.
One can't exist without the other.
Exactly. Yeah. And I find that dynamic incredibly powerful and satisfying. Here I am living in Warsaw now, by the way, everybody. I've been here for the last 4 years, and I've been doing musical tours of the historic synagogues of Poland, the ones that survived the Holocaust. And there are not many Jews left, obviously. And it's a very complicated situation here. But there are many Jewish communities. There's the Reform and the Conservative, Orthodox, and Chabad. And I recently connected with Rabbi Shalom Stambler from Israel, of the Chabad synagogue here. And it's fascinating. In New York, I never in a million years would have thought to perform in a Chabad environment. Because like I say, I'm a firebrand when it comes to interpretations of traditional Jewish music. A lot of people don't like it because it's too much my own expression. But I recently did a Hanukkah concert for Chabad, and with my arrangements as they are, and the rabbi was open, and so I feel like music bridges different communities together. And not only people of different faiths, but even within the Jewish world, right? Music binds us, as a people. I choose not to pay attention to the boundaries, to me and them. It's all part of a tapestry. And one other short story which really highlights that fact. Several years ago, I was on a musical tour of the States for the Festival of Sacred Music in Fez. They wanted to do a promotional tour. And so the tour, there was a Lebanese drummer, a South Indian vocalist, a Palestinian violinist and oud player, a Muslim Sufi group from Morocco, someone from the medieval Christian tradition, and I represented the Jewish. And so we all shared in each other's repertoire, and then we did our own set. And the first time I connected with this Palestinian, right, and Lebanese and people from different faiths, there's always a sense that what has been imposed upon us by the political dynamics of the day, if you will, is BS, right? people start to make music together, and it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. And that's why in this time, this pandemic time, in a divisive time, what I feel is so important is to communicate through the arts and through music. And the irony is that at a time when there is so little opportunity really to perform, right? The arts are being decimated. I have so many artist friends and colleagues who are selling their instruments because they don't have enough food to put on the table. It's exactly when we need this cathartic expression of art more than ever. You know, people need art, and it's always the sort of the first thing to go, right? Oh, well, it's not so important, but you need to feed the soul. And this is what's often lacking in, well, certainly in this pandemic time, that is just brutal on so many artists.
This is, I will shamelessly say, hire artists for your projects now. You know, have people perform for you online. I have no problem advocating for that. There are lots of musicians here in the States and Europe who are looking for work. And as Anna just put in, or as you just said, and Anna just reiterated into the chat, music brings us together. So let's go ahead and move on to our next work, Bin El Barak. Can you tell us a little bit about this work? And I mean, at least in my listening, I could really, this was the one that stood out to me as just a deep connection to your own Jewish neshama.
Yeah.
You know,
Bin El Barak William is a song from Morocco and Algeria. And it's a song that is an Arabic popular tune, but also the same melody used for Ki Shmera Shabbat. And none other than Rambam, the great Maimonides, said that it's fine to use a secular melody from the street, in a liturgical context. It's a melody that opens the heart to God, so it's fine. And this has been part of the Jewish tradition forever. You know, we hear a melody we like, right? And we go, oh, wouldn't Lecha Dodi sound really great with this melody? You know, I recently heard sing a wonderful Tatar song, right? Had nothing to do with the Jewish tradition. But I started playing this song and singing the words in Tatar. And then I thought, geez, that's a Lecha Dodi if I ever heard one. And I started adapting this melody to our famous Shabbat prayer. So this is such a song. It's from the Arabic tradition, which is also sung to Ki Shmera Shabbat. And again, like the Kochav Tzedek, this is one that I kind of took into the studio and started painting and creating a completely different sound to.
השפעת אל ישמרני אותי לעולמי עד בינו וביני כי ישמר השפעת אל ישמרני אותי לעולמי עד בינו וביני
So it's just I hear I use the melody to take me to somewhere else. You know, the whole ride out, which I'm glad you muted because it just goes on for another 2 minutes of pure instrumental. It's just I have so much fun doing that. And as I was telling Guy earlier, that I love going from the recording studio to the stage. The recording studio keeps you honest on stage, and the stage gives you the inspiration that you're able to draw from the live. You know, you've got to recreate an audience for yourself when you're in the studio. So it's I love going back and forth.
Out of curiosity, an arrangement like that, I guess when you create it, are you imagining it for the studio? Or are you imagining it for a concert? Are you imagining it for a service?
First, I started just as a pure musical vocal guitar arrangement. Mm-hmm. And when I perform it live, that arrangement will hold up if I'm doing it solo, or adding whatever group of musicians or ensembles I work with here in Poland or the States. And I always leave enough space for each musician that I'm working with to have their own creative input, right? I went through a period of scoring things much more specifically, but I found that the music ended up sounding a little bit stilted, because this is folk music after all, and I inject a certain amount of classicism because I'm, classically trained as a guitarist and singer. So for me, the interest, because some of these songs I've been singing for the last, 20, 25 years, the interest is to constantly rediscover the music depending on who I'm playing with. And it's so much fun because here in Warsaw, as I said, I've been here for 4 years, and I've been connecting with some amazing musicians, and every group gives me a different feel for the song, and brings something different out of me. And so the same thing happens in the recording studio. I go in with my basic arrangement, and then depending on the engineer or producer I'm working with, we take it somewhere else.
Fabulous. Well, we have one more song, plus I know the bonus that you and I went over earlier.
Okay.
So just being cognizant of time, I'm wondering if maybe we should choose one of those so we can open it up for questions after.
Sure. Why don't we, which A la Una Yo Nací, do you have the clip, the live clip from Museum of Jewish Heritage?
I don't have that one queued up, but I could pull it up for you very quickly.
Well, because that would be sort of a different, it'd be good to hear a song in the context of an ensemble, right?
Sure.
If you can pull that one up, that would be great.
Not a problem. I can certainly do that.
So this particular clip was recorded, a show that I produced several years ago in New York City at the Museum of Jewish Heritage called The Spirit of Sepharad. And it was a multimedia experience with background videography, dance, narration, music. And we wanted to show basically as the title implies, the spirit of Sepharad. So.
A las dos me engrandecí, a la una yo nací, a las dos me engrandecí, a las tres tomé amante y a las cuatro me casé, a las tres tomé amante y a las cuatro me casé. Dime niña, ¿dónde vienes? Que te quiero conocer. Dime niña, ¿dónde vienes? Que te quiero conocer. Y si no tienes amante, yo te haré defender. Y si no tienes amante, yo te haré defender. Yéndome para la guerra, dos besos al aire di.
Go ahead and stop it there, just being aware of time. If you could give us a quick summary again of just what the words mean a little bit, just so we...
This is a song from medieval Spain. A la una yo nací, at one I was born. A las dos me engrandecí, at two I grew up. A las tres tomé amante, at three I took a lover. Y a las cuatro me casé, at four I got married. Dime niña, de donde vienes? Tell me, my young lass, where you come from. And if you have no lover, let me be the one to defend you. Yéndome para la guerra, dos besos al aire di. Going off to war, I blew two kisses into the air. Uno fue para mi madre. One was for my mother. This is a Jewish song after all, right? Mothers have to be honored. Y el otro para ti, and the other one for you, dear love. One of my favorite songs. There's almost... I always say, okay, I got to stop playing this at every concert, but I ended up, if it's not part of the program, I always do it as an encore at least.
I mean, I can see why, but if you don't mind me prying just a little bit, what is it? Is there any one particular thing that just speaks so much to you that you always come back to that song?
It's one of these arrangements that I did that is just so satisfying to play.
Sure.
And it really, really gives my musicians or my vocalists an opportunity to harmonize and to it just has an emotional soil that for me is so satisfying. It's just a beautiful song. That's
wonderful. I really love the arrangement. The flamenco influence, at least I think it's flamenco influence, really speaks.
Oh, absolutely.
As I said at the very beginning, this entire lesson this entire masterclass has been an exercise in me not getting up to dance. So,
in fact, if some of you are interested, on January 23rd, you can follow me on Facebook. You'll see all the announcements. I'm doing, I'm actually rebroadcasting a concert of my flamenco Sepharad show. So
Fantastic.
you'll hear this song plus many others in a very flamenco style, with a dancer and flamenco guitarist, cajon, bass.
And
so,
I was just going to say, if anyone wants to see some of these videos, the link to Gerard's website was just put in the chat, and please explore them. It's probably been the most fun thing I've done in the last week has been watching these videos.
and there's on my YouTube channel, there's probably, I don't know, close to 300 performance videos. So yeah,
wonderful.
I keep doing this stuff, but join us on January 23rd if you're free. It'll be at 7 p.m. Warsaw time. So you're 9 hours before. So 7. So it'll be 10 a.m. your time. But then it'll be available. But then it'll be available on YouTube after the transmission. So
fabulous. Well, I think this is a great time for us to open this up to questions. So with that, I know that there have been some questions in the chat. I think there's few of us here enough that if any of you would like to just unmute and actually ask your question, feel free. You can either raise the virtual hand in the participant section or raise a real hand and call on you. Judith Cohen, I see your hand.
Hi, first of all, Gerard, as always, I love your singing.
Hey,
I love
Judith,
your playing.
nice to see you.
However,
Hey.
Gerard, as always, and is so often in our long friendship, and I'm just saying this so that everybody knows that Gerard and I have a very long friendship and collegial friendship, and I'm saying this because I often disagree with him.
Yeah.
So with absolutely no disrespect to your work and your wonderful singing and playing and your collegial and wonderful warm manner, these are not medieval songs. They are not medieval at all. Cuando el Rey Nimrod was composed in the late 1930s, probably by a group of Sephardic men probably in Paris, according to Edwin Cerusi's extensive research. A la una yo nací is not a medieval Sephardic song. And in fact, none of the really popular, the sort of top 10 Sephardic hits are medieval at all. Most of them are mid to late 19th century and later. So what we do have is we have a lot of old narrative ballads, not ballads in the sense of the English popular ballad, but ballad in the sense of it tells a story. You know, the king got up and he got on his horse and he took his sword up and he slashed a couple of heads on his way, that kind of thing. So a lot of the words to those Sephardic ballads do go back to before the expulsion, but not the tunes. There's no tunes at all. And none of the popular love songs. I just want to say that. And I think they're wonderful songs, and they're just as wonderful if they're not medieval. So
no, for sure. It's an interesting point. I mean, you never stop learning. So I really from all the collections that I've seen, these songs are often in a medieval context. They're expressed in a medieval context, and the ballads that I've seen, like El Rey por mucha madruga, for instance, you're saying that melody is not medieval?
So El Rey que mucha madruga is the ballad of Landarico. So it's a very interesting one. I've actually written articles about that ballad, but the story
By
of
the way,
ballad,
Judith is the authority. She keeps me honest. She's the authority on Sephardic music.
Gerard is the most generous, lovely person to have discussions with. I was, truly.
You're fantastic.
Ever since I first kind of accosted you in Central Park Apartments and said, hey, I'm an incipient ethnomusicologist. Can I talk to you? And you brought up coffee. But anyway, so the story of Landarico actually goes back to the 6th century Merovingian dynasty. But the ballad doesn't show up until the 16th century. Like, it doesn't even show up in pre-expulsion Spain. So somewhere along the line, you learned it. The melodies are all different. There is no melody. So the melody everyone knows, which is, El Rey que mucha madruga. That's Turkey. It's Turkish. It's from sometime in the diaspora. We don't know when. The Moroccan melody is Levantóse el rey a casar. We don't know when it's from. And there are many other melodies that are not as pretty as either of those. So the melodies developed over time. The words to the ballad are around the expulsion, and the story of the ballad is centuries earlier. And that's kind of how most of the narrative ballads work. But the songs like A la una yo nací and Cuando el rey Nimrod and Adiós querido, which Verdi did not steal from the Jews. He did not. Yeah. The other way around, they adapted it. Right. They're wonderful songs that are from much later on. They're from late on in the Sephardic diaspora. So I would just personally like to stop seeing people equate wonderful song with X number of hundreds of years, because a wonderful song is just a wonderful song. And the fact that Sephardim keep on speaking the language and keeping their culture alive and adapting it and growing with it and doing different things with it, to me, that's the exciting part.
Well, that is exciting, but still some of those songs are several centuries old. Yeah, some of those songs are still...
with your own background, growing and developing and adding the influences from all the other musics you've worked with. That's the Sephardic story, not whether something is medieval or not, because they aren't.
No, of course, but still some of them are several centuries old.
The words, the words, and none of the words are the popular ones, and none of the tunes.
All right.
Sorry, but it's just...
I don't know. So some of the melodies.
Right. As interesting as this is, I want to make sure that we give everybody a chance to speak that would like to.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Judith. I see Sarah Wald has a question.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to follow up on some of the remarks you made about kind of the collections you consult and how you source and prepare the songs. I've been delving into this repertoire somewhat myself, and
as a singer?
No, actually, as a composer. So, as you know, there are multiple versions of the same song that you can find in different collections, and they can vary by region or by individual informant. And so I was just wondering, when you decide to perform a song, do you seek out multiple sources for the same song and then kind of compare, contrast? Do you pick your favorite one? Do you end up doing kind of a hybrid of different versions? And that goes for both the music and the text. So I was just wondering if you could speak to that a bit.
Well, usually when I find a song that I want to sing, I don't mix a different version to it, right? Like, for instance, Avrij mi Galanika, a song from Thessalonica, or Galanika, right? They're similar texts, though the texts vary a little bit. The melodies are different, but they also are similar. So my own, as I said earlier, my own predilection in terms of what repertoire I choose to do is the melody that moves me, the melody that moves me. And sometimes I will take great freedom and I see a particular text that I want to compose my own melody to, right? So I've done that with several poems in Ladino. And sometimes I will also take liberties of hearing a melody that I don't find that interesting, but there are elements of that melody that are. And so I embroider that melody, right? So it's a very, very fluid process.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Sarah. There was a question from David Monick, which, it's I don't want to say it's a simple question, but it is a simple question, but it's one of those ones that falls to any Jewish music person, any Jewish music specialist. And that's, how many languages do you speak? How many do you have to sing in?
Well, I sing, I don't know, in over 15 languages, probably.
Wow.
First, as a singer, as a classical opera singer, I had to sing in all the Romance languages, and I learned how to sing in Russian and, German, Italian, Latin. I mean, it's not hard for me to learn how to sing those languages, especially when you're trained in IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. You can phoneticize pretty much any language. But I would say I feel very comfortable speaking in French, Spanish, English, and now Polish.
Très bien. Looking through real quick, and forgive me if I miss anyone's question. Feel free to speak up if I do. Are there other questions that have yet to be addressed? Well, then, if there are no other questions, and I'll leave it open to it if there are. But I think a question that I'll have for you is, so what are you doing now? What are you doing with your time in quarantine? How are you finding ways to be creative and musical in isolation?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. Honestly, it's been a challenge. It's been now over a year since really I've been going from my home to my studio, which is a block away. And I was keeping a great deal of focus and energy in the first 7-8 months. And lately, it just drags on, and there's like pandemic fatigue. And there's also such a longing to be performing for live audiences again. It's what I do. It's like I've been, most of my performing life, I do 80, 100 concerts a year. And now I've tried to do more online, to do concerts online, but it's a very different experience. I'm glad we have the opportunity to do it, but it's hard sometimes to keep the focus. I'm not as productive in terms of composing, arranging, and stuff as I've been, because it's the live performances that keep you, very focused. The old expression, if you want something done, give it to someone who's very busy. The more concerts I have to prepare, the more productive I am.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that way. So it's a challenge, and I really hope for everyone's sake that it's over soon, because it's exhausting.
It is, and I think all of us, if I speak for someone incorrectly, I apologize, but I think just about everybody is excited to go back to some live performances, and God willing, you can come out here and perform for us in person in the future. Yeah,
I would love to do that.
There is one more question, and this is actually something that has been in the back of my mind, but I haven't asked it this entire time. Is the painting behind you? This comes from Phyllis Wilner. Is it yours? Because because it looks very similar to some of the images in your on the videos, but also it's layered just like your music.
Well, it's a painting done by a very good friend of mine from New York, Margaret Zox Brown. And it's a painting that I bought from her many, many years ago. And it's one of the, I had to leave so many things back in New York when I moved to Poland, including, dozens of guitars and paintings. But this is one that I've always loved very much. And it's, this one here is more my flamenco painting, by my sister. My sister's a painter, and she's graced the cover of many CDs.
Wow.
And this painting that you see is the cover of one of my CDs as well. So, I love painting, and I try to incorporate that not only on my CD covers, but in certain shows that I do with background videography. I incorporate live painting as well.
As it turns out, we do have a couple more questions. Guy Mendello, a question for Gerard.
Yeah, it's one of the curious things about these. There seems to be a dynamic interplay between the home and synagogue life, at least when it comes to Ottoman Jewish songs and early commercial recordings. For example, as Judith points out in many of our articles, romanzas and cantigas were often sung at home. They were often sung by non-professional women singers on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have male professionals like Chaim Effendi or Yitzhak Al-Ghazi and other artists for example, on the Orpheon and Odeon records, who would popularize the same songs. And these would often feature ensembles of professional Ottoman instrumentalists. And in many cases, we know that the male professionals would say that they've learned their material from their tias or from their nonas at home. But to what extent did the same female family members learn their songs from the commercial recordings made by these popular Constantinople record companies? These were geared primarily for Ottoman Jewish consumption. In other words, what is the relationship between what we may think of as authentic, a troubling term, and early commercial recordings?
Goodness, that's probably a question that Judith is more qualified to answer than I am. Judith, you want to answer?
Well, thanks, Gerard. You're still talking to me.
Yeah.
Love you, Guy. Quite a large extent in some cases. What's fascinating about the commercial recording industry in Turkey, well, in what is today's Turkey and today's Istanbul, is it was in place by the first decade of the 20th century. So before 1910, you could go out and you could buy a record, as in record. And among the upper social economic classes, not even upper, really the middle to upper, it was a big thing to have a record player. And because many of the first recordings were of Jewish singers, as Guy says, of Chaim Effendi and that whole generation, people had them. And there are, like when I interviewed Buena Sarfati Garfinkel from Salonika, one of her so-called coplas was about women comparing the number of recordings they had. And she was saying things like, Sarika says that she has, 7 recordings and that so-and-so only has 5, this kind of thing. So it was a pretty big thing. And she even hummed the oud recordings. What's really interesting, Guy and Gerard and anyone else, is Buena, who was born in 1916 or early 1918. Even when she sang, she would hum the oud interludes. That could be traced to like Chaim Effendi or these others, but it's fascinating because, as Guy said, the interaction between the kitchen and the recording studio was really new and really unusual. And you really pointed that out well, Guy. In Morocco also, like, I know your family is the famous Edery family from the north of Morocco. The women's tunes ended up in the synagogue very, very often as contrafacta, but not so much performed in public. When the men, the Moroccan Jewish men, performed in public, it was more the shared Moroccan Jewish Andalusi repertoire. But in the synagogue, they did. They picked up a lot of their mothers and their aunts and grandparents' tunes. But in the Ottoman area, it found its way very, very quickly into professional recordings. And the women's recordings we don't have. We don't have these recordings from 1910, 1915 of women singing in their kitchen. We don't have field recordings. So it's really hard to know to what extent the professional singers like Chaim Effendi, added their own professionality and their own aesthetic and so on.
Well, it's what we were talking about earlier, that oral traditions are so fluid that it's
Absolutely.
very hard to know where one melody stops and the other starts. But I'll interject that it reminded me of a concert I did down in Tampa, Florida, 10 years ago at least. And there was this old Sephardic woman, maybe in her 90s. And after she heard the concert, she started talking to me about different versions of the songs that she had heard me sing. And the next day for the workshop I was doing, she brought me a whole huge box of her recordings. And she said, I don't need these anymore. These are for you. See what you can see. And there were cassettes, there were, vinyl records. And so it's like she was probably collecting, I don't know how many versions of every song by all the artists of the time. So I was very, very moved. And I did learn some tunes from those.
Wonderful.
cassettes.
That's so great.
Thank you.
So
I think we have time for one last question. Adrian Schiff, I see your hand has been up for a while. Adrian?
It was a mistake. It was a mistake.
Okay, no problem. I've done that.
But I will say, amazing, just wonderful, wonderful performance, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
yes, I've enjoyed myself.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Are there any other questions? Well, with that, there is. Rick Gold.
Thanks so much. I wanted to see how your Moroccan Jewish heritage influenced your interest in Sephardic music.
Well, my grandfather on my mother's side was Argentinian. So I grew up listening to tangos and Latin American music. My grandfather on my father's side was Judeo-Berber. And so I heard a lot of, Arabic Berber music. Then I heard of course, the rabbis in the synagogue. And partly in Casablanca, but I left Casablanca, I was almost 5 years old. Then we moved to Paris, and we were at La Synagogue du Rue Buffo, which is a Sephardic shul there. And my grandfather was there every day. So I heard those melodies, and everything became, how should I put it? Each fed the other, right? So that when I started singing the songs in Ladino, and Spanish is one of my native languages, it started to feel like I came home, drawing on my heritage, Judeo-Spanish on my mother's side and Judeo-Berber on my father's side. So very interesting mixture. And it sensitized me to so many different styles within the Sephardic context. I always say Sephardic music to me is world music because it involves so many different musical styles depending on where the Jews ended up in the diaspora. They were influenced by those cultures and their own their own music influenced those cultures as well. So it's a real blend.
Wonderful. Well, I think with that, I think we can officially say thank you, Gerard, so much for doing this program with us. I think it has truly been illuminating to hear about your process and how you take tradition and put it through the Gerard Edery filter and just see how it comes out. And it truly is amazing. I want to quickly take this opportunity to also thank my colleague Beth Kramer, who has been on this call and assisting me, and my colleague who has not been on this call, Dr. Mark Kligman, the director of our organization, the Lowell Milken Center for Music of American Jewish Experience at the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music. We hope you will continue to tune into our programs. As we mentioned at the beginning, our next program is February 16th with the Yiddish troubadour Daniel Kahn. And that will be at the same time because he's coming to us from Berlin. So with that, thank you, Gerard. And because we so infrequently get to hear a real applause, I would encourage all of you, unmute yourselves for the moment and give an actual applause. It's nice for us all to hear.
Thank you all. Thank you very, very much. And Lori, thank you so much.
Gerard, it's been a real pleasure.
To this masterclass. Okay.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Stay well, everybody. Stay safe.